Hello, welcome to the video lecture series on digital image processing. We will talk about the discrete cosine transform, we will talk about the discrete Walsh transform, we will talk about discrete Hadamard transform, and we will also see some properties of these different transformation techniques. Now, during the last two classes, when we have talked about the discrete Fourier transformation, you might have noticed one thing, that this discrete Fourier transformation is nothing but a special case of a class of transformations or a class of separable transformations. Some of these discussions we have done while we have talked about the unitary transformation. Now, before we start our discussion on the discrete cosine transformation or Walsh transformation or Hadamard transform, let us have some more insight on this class of transformations. Now, as we said that discrete Fourier transformation is actually a special case of a class of transformations. Let us see what is that class of transformation. You find that if we define a transformation of this form, say T u v is equal to double summation f x y, where f x y is the two dimensional signal, into g x y u v, where both x and y vary from 0 to capital N minus 1. So, we are assuming that our two dimensional signal f x y is an n by n array, capital N by capital N array, and the corresponding inverse transformation is given by f x y is equal to double summation. Again we have this transformation matrix, transform coefficients T u v into h x y u v, where this g x y u v, this is called the forward transformation kernel, and h x y u v is called the inverse transformation kernel or the basis functions. Now, these transformations, this class of transformation will be separable if we can write g x y u v in the form g 1 x u into g 2 y v. So, if g x y u v can be written in the form g 1 x u into g 2 y v, then this transformation will be a separable transformation. Moreover, if g 1 and g 2, these are functionally same, that means if I can write this as g 1 x u into g 1 y v, that is, I am assuming g 1 and g 2 to be functionally same. So, in that case, this class of transformations will be separable obviously, because g x y u v we have written as product of two functions g 1 x u into g 2 y v, and since g 1 x u and g 2 y v, so this function g 1 and g 2 they are functionally same. So, this I can write as g 1 x u into g 1 y v, and in this case the function will be called as symmetric. So, here what we have is this particular transformations or class of transformations are called separable as well as symmetric, and the same is also true for the inverse transformation kernel, that is h x y u v. Now, find that for a two dimensional discrete Fourier transformation, we had g x y u v which was of this form e to the power minus j 2 pi by capital N into u x plus v y, and of course, we had this multiplicative term 1 upon capital N. So, this was the forward transformation kernel in case of two dimensional discrete Fourier transform or 2D DFT. Obviously, this transformation is separable as well as symmetric, because I can now write this g x y u v as g 1 x u multiplied by g 1 y v, which is nothing but 1 over square root of capital N e to the power minus j 2 pi by capital N u x into 1 over square root of n e to the power minus j 2 pi by capital N v y. So, you find that the first product g 1 x u and the second term, that is g 1 y v, they are functionally same, but only the arguments x, in one case it is u x and in the other case it is v y. So, obviously, this two dimensional discrete Fourier transformation is separable as well as symmetric. So, as we said that this represents a specific case of the two dimensional discrete Fourier transformation, represents a specific case of a class of transformations, and we had also discussed it, discussed the same when we have talked about the unitary transformation. In today's lecture, we will talk about some other transformations belonging to the same class. The first transformation belonging to this class that we will talk about is called the discrete Fourier transformation or DCT. Let us see what are the forward as well as inverse transform kernels of this discrete Fourier transformation. So, now let us talk about the discrete Fourier transformation or DCT. In case of discrete Fourier transformation, the forward kernel, forward transformation kernel g x y u v is given by alpha times u into alpha times v into cosine 2 x plus 1 u pi upon 2 n into cosine 2 y plus 1 into v pi upon twice n, which is same as the inverse transformation kernel, which is given by x h x y u v. So, you find that in case of discrete cosine transformation, if you analyze this, you find that both the forward transformation kernel and also the inverse transformation kernel, they are identical. And not only that, these transformation kernels are separable as well as symmetric, because in this I can have g 1 x u equal to alpha u cosine twice x plus 1 u pi divided by twice n, and g 1 y v can be alpha times v into cosine 2 y plus 1 v pi upon twice n. So, this transformation, the discrete cosine transformation, is separable as well as symmetric, and the inverse transformation kernel and the forward transformation kernel, they are identical. Now, we have to see what are the values of alpha u and alpha v. Here alpha u is given by square root of 1 upon capital N, where u is equal to 0 and it is equal to square root of twice by capital N for values of u equal to 1, 2 to capital N minus 1. So, these are the values of alpha u for different values of u, and similar is the values of alpha v for different values of v. Now, using this forward and inverse transformation kernels, let us see how the basis functions or the basis images look like in case of discrete cosine transform. So, this figure shows the two-dimensional basis images or basis functions in case of discrete cosine transformation, where we have shown the basis images for an 8 by 8 discrete cosine transformation or 8 by 8 two-dimensional discrete cosine transformation. Now, using these kernels, now we can write the expressions for the two-dimensional discrete cosine transformation in the form of C u v is equal to alpha u alpha v double summation f x y into cosine of 2x plus 1 into pi u upon twice n into cosine of twice y plus 1 pi v upon twice n, where both x and y vary from 0 to capital N minus 1. Similarly, the inverse discrete cosine transformation can be written as f x y is equal to double summation alpha u times alpha v times C u v. So, C u v is the coefficient matrix into cosine of twice x plus 1 u pi upon twice capital N into cosine of twice y plus 1 into v pi upon twice capital N, and now u and v vary from 0 to capital N minus 1. So, this is the forward two-dimensional discrete cosine transformation and this is the inverse two-dimensional discrete cosine transformation. Now, you find that there is one difference. In case of forward discrete cosine transformation, the terms alpha u and alpha v were kept outside the summation, double summation, whereas in case of inverse discrete cosine transformation, the terms alpha u and alpha v are kept inside the double summation. The reason being, in case of forward transformation, because the summation is taken over x and y varying from 0 to capital N minus 1. So, alpha u and alpha v, these terms are independent of this summation operation. Whereas, in case of inverse discrete cosine transformation, the double summation is taken over u and v, varying from 0 to capital N minus 1. So, these terms alpha u and alpha v were kept are kept inside the double summation operation. So, using this discrete cosine transformation, two dimensional discrete cosine transformation, let us see that for a given image what kind of output we get. So, this figure shows the discrete discrete cosine transformation coefficients for the same image, which is very popular in image processing community, the image of Lena. The results are shown in two forms. The first figure, this is the coefficients which are shown in the form of intensity plots in the form of a two dimensional array, whereas the third figure shows the same coefficients which are plotted in the form of a three dimensional in the form of a surface in 3 dimension. Now, if you closely look at these output coefficients, you find that in case of discrete cosine transformation, the energy of the coefficients are concentrated mostly in a particular region where the coefficients are near the origin, that is 0 0, which is more visible in the case of a 3 dimensional pot. So, you find that here in this particular case the energy is concentrated in a small region in the coefficient space near about the 0 0 coefficients. So, this is a very important property of the discrete cosine transformation, which is called energy compaction property. Now, among the other properties of discrete cosine transformation, which is obviously similar to the discrete Fourier transformation, as we have said that the discrete cosine transformation is separable as well as symmetric. It is also possible to have a faster implementation of discrete cosine transformation or FDCT in the same manner as we have implemented FFT in case of discrete Fourier transformation. The other important property of the discrete cosine transformation is the periodicity property. Now, in case of discrete cosine transformation, you will find that the periodicity is not same as in case of discrete Fourier transformation. In case of Fourier transformation, we have said that the discrete Fourier transform is periodic with period capital N, where N is the number of samples. In case of discrete cosine transformation, the magnitude of the coefficients are periodic with a period twice n, where n is the number of samples. So, the periodicity in case of discrete cosine transformation is twice, or the period in case of discrete cosine transformation is twice of the period in case of discrete Fourier transformation. And we will see later that this particular property helps to obtain data compression, a smoother data compression using the discrete cosine transformation and not using the discrete Fourier transformation. The other property which obviously helps the data compression using discrete cosine transformation is the energy compaction property, because most of the signal energy or image energy is concentrated in a very few number of coefficients near the origin or near the 0 0 value in the frequency domain in the UV plane. So, by coding few number of coefficients, we can represent or we can represent most of the energy, most of the signal energy or most of the image energy. So, that also helps in the data compression using discrete cosine transformation, a property which is not normally found in case of discrete Fourier transformation. So, after discussing about all these different properties of the discrete cosine transformation, let us go to the other transformation, which we have said as Walsh transformation. So, now let us discuss about the Walsh transform. In case of 1D, the discrete Walsh transform kernels are given by G x u is equal to 1 upon capital N into product minus 1 to the power b I x into b n minus 1 minus I x, where the product is taken over I equal to 0 to n minus 1. So, you find in this particular case the capital N gives you the number of samples and the lowercase n is the number of bits needed to represent x as well as u. Sorry, this is u, not x. So, capital N is the number of samples and the lowercase n is the number of bits needed to represent both x and u. And in this case, the forward transformation kernel is given by g x u equal to 1 upon capital N into product I equal to 0 to lowercase n minus 1 minus 1 to the power b I x into b n minus 1 minus I u. Now, in this particular case, the convention is, say if I represent b k z represents the kth bit in the digital representation of z, digital or binary representation of z. So, that is the interpretation of b I x. So, using this, the forward discrete Walsh transformation will be given by W u in case of one dimension will be given by 1 upon capital N summation f x into product I equal to 0 to lowercase n minus 1 minus 1 to the power b I x into b n minus 1 minus I u, where x varies from 0 to capital N minus 1. The inverse transformation kernel in case of this discrete Walsh transformation is identical with the forward transformation kernel. So, h x u, the inverse transformation kernel, is same as product I equal to 0 to lowercase n minus 1 into minus 1 to the power b I x into b n minus 1 minus I u, and using this inverse transformation kernel we can get the inverse Walsh transformation as f x equal to summation u equal to 0 to capital N minus 1 W u product I equal to 0 to lowercase n minus 1 minus 1 to the power b I x into b n minus 1 minus I u. So, this is the inverse kernel and this is the inverse transformation. So, here you find that the discrete Walsh transformation, both the forward transformation and the inverse transformation, they are identical. Only thing is there is a difference of the multiplicative factor 1 upon capital N, but otherwise because the transformations are identical. So, the algorithm used to perform the forward transformation, the same algorithm can also be used to perform the inverse Walsh transformation. Now, in case of two dimensional signal, so in case of two dimensional signal, we will have the transformation kernel as g x y u v, which is equal to 1 upon capital N product I equal to 0 to lowercase n minus 1 minus 1 to the power b I x into b n minus 1 minus I u plus b I y into b n minus 1 minus I v. And the inverse transformation kernel in this case is identical with the forward transformation kernel. So, the inverse transformation kernel is given by 1 upon capital N product again I equal to 0 to lowercase n minus 1 minus 1 to the power b I x b n minus 1 minus I u plus b I y b n minus 1 minus I v. So, using this forward transformation kernel and the inverse transformation kernel, now find that the inverse and as well as the forward discrete Walsh transformation can now be implemented as W u v is equal to 1 upon capital N double summation f x y into product I equal to 0 to n minus 1 minus 1 to the power b I x into b n minus 1 minus I u plus b I y into b n minus 1 minus I v, and the summation has to be taken over x and y varying from 0 to capital N minus 1. And in the same manner, because the forward transformation as well as the inverse transformation, they are identical in case of discrete Walsh transformation, the same expression if I replace f x y by W u v and the summation is taken over u v varying from 0 to capital N minus 1, what I get is the inverse Walsh transformation and I get back the original signal f x y from the transformation coefficients W u v. So, you find that here the same algorithm which is used for computing the forward Walsh transformation can also be used for computing the inverse Walsh transformation. So, now let us see that what are the basis functions of this Walsh transformation and what are the results on some image. So, for Walsh transformation, the basis function appears like this, or the set of basis images appear like this. Here the basis images are given for a 4 by 4 2D Walsh transformation, and if I apply this Walsh transformation on the same image, say Lena, you find that this is the kind of result that we get. So, here again you find that the property of these cosine transformations, that is the coefficients near 0, they are having the maximum energy, and as you go away from the origin in the u v plane, the energy of the coefficients reduces. So, this transformation also has the energy compaction property, but here you find that the energy compaction property is not as strong as in case of the discrete cosine transformation. So, here the coefficient energies which is mostly concentrated in this particular region, is not that strong as the compaction of energy in case of discrete cosine transformation. And by analyzing this forward as well as the inverse transformation Walsh transform kernels, you can again find out that this Walsh transformation is separable as well as symmetric. Not only that, for this Walsh transformation, it is also possible to have a fast implementation of 2D Walsh transformation almost in the same manner as we have done in case of the discrete Fourier transformation, where we have computed the first Fourier transform or FFT. So, in case of discrete Walsh transformation, the first implementation of the Walsh transformation will be even simpler, and in this case the first transformation can be implemented as WU. So, here we are saying that because the Walsh transformation is separable, so the same way in which we have done the Fourier transformation, 2D Fourier transformation, that the Walsh transformation, 2D Walsh transformation can be implemented by using a sequence of one dimensional Walsh transformation, and that is also true in case of discrete cosine transformation. So, first you perform one dimensional Walsh transformation along the rows of the image, and then the intermediate result that you get, on that you perform one dimensional Walsh transformation along the columns of the intermediate matrix. So, you get the final transformation coefficients. The same is also true in case of discrete cosine transformation, because the discrete cosine transformation is also separable. So, to illustrate the first implementation of the Walsh transformation, I take the one dimensional case. So, here the first implementation can be done in this form. I can write WU is equal to half of W even U plus W odd U and W U plus capital M is equal to half of W even U minus W odd U. So, you find, and in this case U varies from 0 to capital N by 2 minus 1 and M is equal to N by 2. So, you find that almost in the same manner in which we have implemented the first Fourier transformation, the discrete two dimensional or discrete Walsh transformation, first discrete Walsh transformation can also be implemented in the same manner. Here we divide all the samples of for which the Walsh transformation has to be taken into even numbered samples and odd numbered samples, compute the Walsh transformation of the even numbered samples, compute the Walsh transform of the odd numbered samples, then combine these two intermediate results to give you the Walsh transformation of the total number of samples. And because this division can be recursive, so first I have n number of samples, I divide them into n by 2 odd samples and n by 2 even samples. Even n by 2 odd samples can be divided into n by 4 number of odd samples and even samples. And if I continue this and finally I come to a stage where I am left with only 2 samples, I perform the Walsh transformation of those 2 samples, then hierarchically combine those intermediate results to get the final Walsh transformation. So, here again by using this first implementation of the Walsh transformation, you may find that the computational complexity will be reduced drastically. Thank you.